I think to many of these problems that we look at here on the David Tulis Show, the answer is local economy and the free markets. That is, in fact, our theme, whether we are looking at policing or whether we're looking at the law or county government or city government. The solution to many of these problems is not national. It is, in fact, local. And often the solution is right there in the law. It's allowed in the law, or it's required in the law in some way that favors the people of our city and our county. For example, the rules governing Chattanooga Police Department officers is that they Mirandize a person upon arrest, and yet that comes from the 1960s decision, Arizona versus Miranda, or Miranda versus Arizona. He appealed, and the duty in an arrest is to tell the person that he should be quiet, or he may remain quiet. He doesn't have to answer questions. He can refuse to answer any question apart from his lawyer. He has advice to a lawyer. He has the right to have the advice of a lawyer or counsel. And he doesn't have to give away anything. He doesn't have to show anything. He doesn't have to give anything. He doesn't have to consent to anything. That's what Miranda is all about. And the policy on page 13 of the arrest procedures book that Chief Fred Fletcher signed off on has that as a requirement, and is readily ignored. It's widely ignored. And the definition of arrest also needs to be understood. It comes from the courts. The courts have defined what an arrest is in several cases, as we have discussed them, and as they have been weighed at Nooganomics.com when we looked into the Miranda problem. And that is the moment you're not free to leave, especially if you've been stopped on the side of the road, you are under arrest, right? You've been arrested, and all the rights that Miranda is to remind you of come into play at that point. And when's the last time you were Mirandized? Well, you haven't been. And this is not just a violation of police policy itself, reflecting honorably that ruling, which, by the way, Miranda is a pro-government ruling, right? It's not pro-constitutional rights or pro-individual. It's a pro-government ruling to allow the continuing abuse of the citizenry by the police. And the court realized that we have to protect this so-called compelling state interest, and yet we have to kind of modify it just a little bit to give the appearance that we care for the people and we care for constitutional liberty by ruling against Arizona in that case, and outlining what the rights of the defendant are, and that he does not have to be subjected to abusive interrogation, or in fact really any interrogation at all, if he chooses not to speak. Right? That's what the court recognized. And so the court wanted to have it both ways: constitutional rights on one hand and the police state on the other. So Miranda is a pro-police position, a pro-police policy, a pro-state progressive policy that is part of our departmental rule here in Chattanooga. And it's readily ignored. It's ignored by everybody, and it's not enforced. Who can dictate that it be enforced? The mayor. Because the police department is an executive branch agency. It serves at the pleasure of the mayor, right? He is the head executive of that agency. It serves him. So any good thing that's done by the officers, there are hundreds of them swarming the countryside here in Chattanooga. Any good thing that they do goes to him, right? He deserves credit. And the abuse of officers, their lies, deceptions, their perjuries, their harassing of black people, their harassing of poor people, and the like, those negatives all go to the mayor. Whoever the mayor is, that's just the way it's designed. And of course, people believe the charade that mayoral office staff keep up, and that is, well, this is, it's an independent agency, and that's not the mayor's responsibility. Well, that's just not true. The mayor has full authority. He has dictatorial authority over that department. It's his department, of course, all within statutory limits. And so we have to understand that policing is political. And so the solution to many abuses is just to say, okay, well, we have it on the books. This is a policy. And if you're an officer, you're going to Mirandize everybody when he's arrested. And let's talk about what arrest is. Okay. An arrest is, it actually starts much sooner in the process than you, the officer, sitting here in the rows of young men and women going out to work today, arrest begins actually sooner than we have led you to believe in the past, right? An arrest is actually much quicker, should be much quicker in your consciousness than we have let you think up till now. So that's the kind of reform that needs to take place. And so the answer to many abuses and many wrongs is local economy. Let's just put it that way. It's local economy and making the most of what we have in the way of resources and not neglecting them. We have reasons left and right to neglect these resources, whether they're in the law or whether they're in the people of Hamilton County and Chattanooga. And I'd say we have probably the best people in Chattanooga and Hamilton County. And I make that comment because last week over Thanksgiving, I took occasion to mention how it is that Chattanooga is blessed more than other parts of the state. In fact, it's blessed more than the state itself. And one key barometer is the self-loathing, hatred of the future, and despair barometer. And one good place of measuring that is in the breast of women, the fair sex, so half our population being women. And the question is, will that woman destroy her baby and her heir, or will she bring that baby to the light of day and love and care for that boy or girl? And Chattanooga has, or the county rather, has less despair among its people than those women elsewhere, men and women elsewhere. Here we killed only 151 boys and girls. Now the slayings probably were not done here; they were done outside of Chattanooga and outside of Hamilton County, in the Tri-Cities, Knoxville, or Nashville, or Atlanta. 9,113 babies in 2015 were destroyed across the state. In Nashville, there are more percentage. In Memphis, even more. And of course, the death ratio among blacks is where it should be, at the greatest level. And that is because the death industry, the baby death industry, Planned Parenthood, founded by Margaret Sanger, she was all for doing blacks the favor of having them voluntarily exterminate their heirs, because blacks were seen by her as a lower class of people among those not fit to reproduce. And so she was really trying to get black ministers to propagandize for her eugenics program and others in the 1920s. And so the despair that she brought to the heart of modern women is great in Memphis, 6 times greater there than here. And statewide, it's 3 times greater statewide than in Chattanooga. So by that barometer, Chattanooga is greatly blessed, right? It kills fewer, its women and its men and women kill fewer of their offspring of those women residing in the county than elsewhere. So you see, we're ahead of other parts of the state. We are, by God's grace, ahead. Now there are some pro-life people who would say that I'm not really accounting for these deaths, and I'm discounting the fact that it is a judgment. It is a judgment, but it's a judgment that, thanks to very moldy state figures that are carefully reviewed for 2 years by Governor Haslam's Department of Health, we can see and count that advantage here. There's more advantage here because we kill fewer babies. It is gruesome, and no doubt we should focus on these women and on their needs. They have needs that are spiritual. They have needs that are cultural. They have needs that are often touching on their personal resources, right? Women who have children or who are expecting are the leading group in poverty. And we have egalitarianism to thank for that. We have atomization of society to thank for that. We have the state encroachment upon the private sector, a deliberate encroachment to thank for that humiliation of women living alone with children. They're the largest group in poverty, and we have several of these circumstances to thank for that, even here in Hamilton County. And yet, at the same time, if we measure the death ratios, we are less bloody, less deadly in Hamilton County and Chattanooga, 6 times less so than in Memphis, and 3 times less so than on the statewide average. So the solutions that we're looking at here about the mentally ill, I think, is is one proposed by the sheriff, Jim Hammond, who's facing an election challenge from at least one person, a Democrat, Victor Miller, a detective in the city police department, and had been for a time the spokesman, the PIO, Public Information Officer, for the police department in Chattanooga. Well, this is David Tulis, and the solutions I think that Jim Hammond is proposing are in the right direction. They are what we need to have. There needs to be more training by officers of all kinds in the arts of treating people. Right, treating meaning to make treaty with people. That would be, we could say, conversation, negotiation, at de-escalation. These are all vital points that herald the future. And the future, by God's grace, will be a much more voluntary future and less statutory, less coercive future, where prosperity is possible and the free will of individuals less hampered, less oppressed by evil circumstances and by state intervention. Because don't forget, when you're arrested, it is a state intervention, and the intervention is on behalf of the law. Usually, you've committed a crime, and we're going to arrest you and charge you and keep you in our dump of a prison for weeks even if you can't make the bail. It doesn't matter if you can't make bail. Well, that's just tough, and we're going to keep you. And so we have in the lives of many people a gross interruption. And they've done something wrong. They've been foolish. They have not been prudent, no doubt. They should have appeared in court, and they didn't. And among the poor, contingencies just are about them like flies around a watermelon left on a picnic table in the summer. Contingencies are things that you can't plan for, and the poor seem to have more of them than other people. And we just have to recognize that people, they don't have calendars, right? They don't mark things. They don't mark down their commitments and so on. And they have car breakdowns. They lose things. They have, their cell phones die. All kinds of things happen in their lives. They can't make rent. And suddenly they have to move. And so they forget some important commitment they've made, to go to court, right? To talk to the probation officer, right? and so they are in the lurch again. And so what do we do? What's the main theme, I think, for us to think through? I suggest that a lococentric perspective is good, and that we come up with solutions ourselves for crises that often can't be improved because there's a law involved and there's not enough consensus to get the law changed. Getting consensus politically for a change can take decades. I mean, look at the consensus against civil asset forfeiture, the state highwayman program, where the state is the robber of thousands of people every year here in Tennessee. The state robs people by at least by the tens of hundreds, okay, by the tens of hundreds of people on the highways, because the officer alleges, well, this cash or these goods that we have taken from you are the fruit of the drug trade. And so we're going to seize them, and now you're going to have to prove that they're not connected with the drug trade in a very tight schedule of administrative hearings in the Department of Safety in Nashville. So you have to go to Nashville to get your money back. Well, so you see, the point I'm making is that the laws are hard to change, and Republicans are. This comes from the Republicans. Okay, this is a Republican evil in Tennessee, and we have cases like that here in Chattanooga. Clancy Covert was telling me a couple years ago about one that he had a young man in a car of another party, and that car was seized by the police. Well, among the local solutions, perhaps on this cash bail problem, would be a wealthy donor who is, as we've been hearing about in other parts of the country, such as in Tulsa. A wealthy donor puts up some hundreds of thousands of dollars in a recycling fund, a recyclable cash fund that pays the bail outright for poor people and gets them out of the jail pronto so that they can continue with their lives. And that program, like some of these mental health programs discussed in the press today, has a recognition that the poor people, often people with mental problems, who are a third or maybe as much as half of the people in the jail. They need reminders, right? They need encouragement. They need sort of a supervisor to say, remember, you got that court hearing next week on Tuesday. Make sure that you plan for daycare. Make sure you talk with your boss today to make sure it's okay that you're not going to be there for the whole day, since you have a 15-second encounter with the judge, and you may have to wait 8 hours to get that. So just tell him to count you off for the day, and so poor people don't often think ahead in those ways, and they're poor in their ideas, not just poor in their purses, and so they need a little bit of encouragement and help. So if we have in that problem here that Jim Hammond is trying to solve, again, is the cash bail problem, the mental health problem, the police legacy thinking problem. These are all kind of problems. They're sort of the same one, right? Over policing is perhaps the rubric that covers all of them. Over policing, or maybe we should just say policing per se. That's the thinking of Alex Vitale in his book, The End of Policing. And I just finished yesterday night the chapter on mental illness, and how policing is only kind of a scourge against mentally ill patients who, since the 1980s, have been the sidewalks flooding the streets and the cheapest places to live. Well, this is David Tulis. I do thank you for giving me just a minute of your time. But again, on that problem of the bail bond, the cash bond problem, a wealthy donor setting up a local program, and he could have other donors contribute. Right? We have these poor people, these people with mental problems who are in the jail. We have them out, we have them free. We have someone sort of looking out for them, some paid person perhaps, some law student working his summer pro bono work perhaps. And we bring about a mercy to the people of Chattanooga and Hamilton County. This is David Tulis, and you can call me, by the way, at any time. The number is 800-8949, 800-8949. Maybe you have a great story to tell me. Do you have a terrible story to tell me? Well, that is the number, 800-894. Now, we're brought to you by Nooganomics.com. There's a story by John Whitehead bringing up a case that he's filed against a police department in Louisiana about a young black man named Gregory Tucker. And he had been pulled over by Louisiana police for a broken taillight, but he didn't feel safe, didn't stop immediately, so he drove on for a bit until he found a well-lit area a few minutes away, and he stopped in front of his cousin's house. Well, it should have been just a routine traffic stop, he says, but it became another example of police brutality in America, and another reason why Americans, he says, are justified in their fear of cops. So as we report at Nooganomics.com, a case filed by the Rutherford Institute in Charlottesville. Police ordered Tucker out of his car, and after he'd stepped out, they immediately placed him under arrest for resisting, in this case, not immediately stopping. And they searched his person and his vehicle. He was ordered to move to the front of the police vehicle and place his hands on the hood. Two more officers arrived on the scene, walked up behind Tucker and grabbed his arm to restrain him and handcuffed him. Then the fourth police officer arrived on the scene. According to dash cam footage, Tucker was thrown to the ground, punched numerous times in the head and body. The police also yelled repeatedly at him to quit resisting. Okay. Tucker, bleeding with injuries to his face, head, and arm, was placed into the back of a police vehicle, and EMTs were called to treat him. He was eventually taken to the hospital for severe injuries to his face and his arm. Mind you, the young man was complying. He just didn't do it fast enough for their purposes. He submitted to the police. He didn't challenge their authority. When they frisked him, searched his car, handcuffed him, and beat him to a pulp. He was guilty of nothing except perhaps ticking off the cops by being too cautious, concerned for his safety, and all too aware of dangers faced by young black men during encounters with police. And that's that story. You can read at Nooganomics.com, our chief sponsor. That is our most frequent encounter with police, and that's along the roadways, whether you're in a vehicle or a motor vehicle or a car. That is often a dangerous circumstance. But Chief David Roddy if we are to believe Mayor Andy Burke is concerned about that and wants this kind of encounter to be diminished to nothing, right? There's no ugly dash cams. Now, in the case that the police dash cam is not working or ends up being deleted by some kind of accident, you, my listener, make sure you have your recording device on at all times in these encounters, and do send me the audio or the video. We'd love to have that and hear about your encounter. We are at 800-8949, 800-8949. This is David Tulis, Dr. Nooganomics, Dr. Local Economy and Free Market. Thank you. And now some important messages for you. Take advantage of our advertising.
Traffic, news, and information. Nooga Radio, Digital FM 95.